Hello and welcome to your full moon walkthrough for the full moon in Aquarius of August 2024. I am your astrologer, Cawnawyn Moore. Today we're going to take a look at this, crazy full moon. It wouldn't be an Aquarius full moon if there wasn't a little bit crazy thrown in. Love you Aquarians out there, my goodness. Today we're going to look at the chart. I'm going to take you through the chart and help you learn a little bit about reading the chart, as well as give you a short forecast for the full moon. So I hope you enjoy. Let's just jump right into the chart here because there's a lot to cover. So we're looking right now at a 0 degrees Aries rising. I always say this for anybody who's new to this, but that means we're not going to take a look at the houses because 0 degrees Aries is not what the rising is at the current time of the full moon. But you can take 11:26 a.m. in Pacific time, translate that to whatever time zone you are in, and the planets should be all in the same position in terms of degrees and minutes, but they will look different in the scope of your chart. And then you can take a look at the houses that the planets are falling in within your local chart to see how it might be affecting you more directly. Also, you can take a look at where 27 degrees of Aquarius, which is where the moon is, and 27 degrees of Leo, where the sun is, how that is landing in your own natal chart in your houses for some idea on how it might be directly affecting you in your arenas of life. We're not going to cover houses today, we're just going to cover planets and aspects. So as I said, the full moon is going to be at this 27 degree mark of Aquarius, very end of the Aquarius and Leo axis. So if we think about the Leo Aquarius axis, this is truly about like self and then relation to community at large and our place within a team, within a group of friends, within an organization. But firstly, the sun being in its home sign of Leo that it rules. The sun is self. The sun is the soul. It's the soul's journey. It's our ego. It's how we are showing up as our authentic selves and how we wish to step into our light in this earthly body. And then if we look at Aquarius energy, the opposite of that is how does the self factor into a much greater whole? How do we participate in terms of a team, in terms of a community amongst friends? How do we stand up for the community? How do we stand apart from a community? And so really taking that into account versus the how am I feeling with self? How am I showing up as my divine self, right? So this moon is really illuminating that relationship, and we're dealing with an opposition here. I'll show a graphic of what the chart is representing. We are standing in the center here on Earth, and then the moon is on one side of the Earth and the sun is on the other. That's what gives us the full moon in the sky, and that's what creates an opposition energy. So the planets are on either side of us on Earth. So that opposing energy is always highlighting relationships, right? So what is our relationship between the self and then how the self operates in a much larger group of people and amongst humanity, right? And so that's what's being highlighted here. And this opposing energy, because they're on opposite sides, they have to grapple, they have to tug of war a little bit. There's a strife, there's a tension in the rope, right? And so that is why full moons can feel so intense, because oftentimes our relationships present these opposing ideas to us, and then we're having to grapple with how we fit into that and kind of pull back from it and, test the rope a little bit. So you might be standing in the moon's light of I am much a part of a much larger community, a much larger group. How is the collective, how is the groups and organizations around me, how are they being affected by my presence? And then somebody comes in with ego and you're like, you're not taking into account all of these other very important things, which is this community, this group that needs to, like, your assistance. Like, can you step out of your ego for a second and recognize a much larger cause at play? Or you might be standing in the sun's light of like, I really need to show up in this way. And maybe this is going against what this organization, this group, these friends, these people are trying to highlight. Maybe this means standing apart from them. And how do I feel about that? Maybe that makes me feel vulnerable or uncomfortable or insecure. So just keep in mind that that is the real story of this. And it can really show up as us trying to find ourselves in this much larger world. What does that even mean? And highlighting that part of us that like is dying to just show itself authentically and creatively and very, very truthfully, right? And what is that going to do in terms of how everybody is going to be affected by it? Who's going to think of it? What are they going to say? What are they going to do? Am I contributing to a greater cause, a greater service, or am I acting against that? So just keep in mind that these things are really being highlighted with this full moon, and this is the story of this full moon pretty much every year. Now we take a look at, okay, how is this exact full moon going to be operating right now? And oh my gosh, look at all this red. So here's the little opposing symbol, which I'll show in zoomed in. And then if we look here, this is a square here. We have our moon squaring Uranus exactly. This is Uranus at 27 degrees Taurus. So now we have a square here with these fixed signs of Taurus and Aquarius. And then we also have the sun at 27 degrees Leo squaring our Uranus at 27 degrees Taurus. And this right here, this square, and opposition, this is what's called a T-square. So if you've heard that term before, that's what that means. There's an opposition and then two squares within that opposition to a planet. And we have a T-square that's in fixed signs here exactly at 27 degrees. Super, super potent, powerful, right? And if we look at this, Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. So now we have the moon in the sign of Aquarius squaring its ruler. This is incredibly activating. And in fact, this really, really might highlight that rebellious nature of this Uranian ruled sign. Uranus is all about revolution, like rebellion, taking what was in the past and throwing it away and saying, I'm done with that. I am amputating that off because I'm off on a new track. And Aquarius isn't afraid to stand out, mostly because it recognizes you gotta like break some rules in order to like change things up a little bit. Aquarius is not afraid to rebel because oftentimes it is rebelling against a construct that is causing harm to a community, a humanity, a brotherhood, a sisterhood. And it says this thing is not working anymore. We need to break out of this and make it better. We need to revolutionize. But the moon is squaring this, so it's activating us to get out of this Taurus, this Aquarius fixed nature, and it's saying, what are we going to do to break out of this fixity, right? And how do we progress forward? And the sun is squaring it too, so this really, really might be like lighting a fire under you, and really motivating you to want to step out of whatever it is that you've been in. So if that opposing relationship has been playing out either in your relationships or in your own heart, right? Or maybe amongst your family members, maybe with your boss, maybe with your coworkers, right? This Uranus energy now really charging this up with a lot of activation, because that's what squares do. They activate us, they push us, they prod us, which is why it can get uncomfortable. We were fine. We were Taurus fixed comfortable here. Well, no, you don't get to be fixed anymore. Something is prodding you forward. Uranus, no less. And so we might be really feeling like we need to do a thing right now. And Uranus is very instantaneous. So it might really feel very, very urgent. Something that is underpinning this is this Mercury. So we've had Mercury now in retrograde for quite some time. It just had its cazimi with the sun, right? Like literally within 24 hours ago. Mercury crossed over the sun, so they were conjunct together, and that means Mercury was very, very much activated by the sun. The sun's light was like blowing it out of proportion. So Mercury, like thoughts, ideas, communication, also issues with transportation, and with technology, which I'm praying I don't have any issues today. Right, while recording this is something that's being highly activated, but it usually marks a turning point in this retrograde, and that Mercury goes back over the sun. So now we're kind of in the second half of this Mercury retrograde. We start learning, okay, like this is what we're dealing with this Mercury retrograde, and now maybe some solutions are arising or a path forward is. But Mercury is still very, very close to us and to the sun, so its power is super loud. Remember, I mean, I've talked about this before in Mercury retrograde content, right? But Mercury retrograde is going to turn the volume way up on Mercury, like it's blowing the speakers out. So the thoughts might really, really be racing. Miscommunication might be crazy because there's just so many words, there's just so much noise, there's just so much talk. And maybe it's too much talk and we're over explaining ourselves and we're putting our feet in our mouth, and that's why I'm talking so fast. And so you have more of this urgency, and then now we have this square to Uranus creating more urgency. It has to be done right this second. I have to cut it out. I have to start something new. I have to break out of my shell. I have to do the thing, make the purchase, whatever it looks like for you. Right? I want you to be aware of this so that way you can really think it through and remind yourself there is in fact more time. There is in fact space to make a wise decision, to hold off on any rash decision making, any recklessness, right? And maybe take some time to retrograde, reconsider, or renegotiate, or just review what is in front of you. Try to slow down. That doesn't mean you can't take this action. This action is incredibly powerful. You could be making choices right now that really set the course forward for you. And I don't want you to feel like you can't make those decisions. But get advice. Aquarius is so much about our friends. Use your friends as an influence if necessary. Get other people to sort of give you that more objective viewpoint if it's something that you're struggling with. Take into consideration all sides, take into consideration the pros and cons, but feel free to make a decision so long as it is well thought out, right? We don't want to rush into anything and then have to deal with the consequences of that very retrograde later. Also, something I want to highlight with this moon as well. We currently have Venus here at 18 degrees of Virgo, having just completed an opposition to Saturn in Pisces. They are both squaring. So here we have another T-square opposition and then these two squares to Jupiter, which was newly conjunct Mars just a week ago. So this happened actually not even a week ago. This was on the 14th. And so these two planets came together. I know I talked a little bit about this, I think in my last full moon when Mars was conjunct Uranus. Now we've had Mars conjunct expansive Jupiter. So a lot of activation, aggression, bravado, fierceness, fearlessness. This can be very much like, I can do anything. I'm capable of all of this and more. I'm going to say yes to all of these things. And then we're dealing with the repercussions of that because maybe our actions were expanded a little too far, right? And also coming into this square with Saturn, that was Saturn coming in saying, I don't think so. Here's some obstacles. Here's some challenges for you to deal with. I'm laughing about this because this feels very relevant to my own life right now, and I'd be really curious. I'd love to know if it's feeling relevant for you. But I know personally, I definitely dealt with this in a very like mercurial Gemini way, and mentally, right, with a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, a lot of big things, and then just getting kind of squashed by Saturn in that process. But this could also show up as, so Saturn's in Pisces right now. This can really look like obstacles and challenges coming from unknowns, from things that really, like perhaps the lack of boundaries, the lack of structure or guidelines is what is creating the obstacle to getting things accomplished. This can look like, this can also look very literally in the terms of like water. Has Saturn come in with like a water damage problem, or have things been really, really emotional because Saturn's like pressure and weight of that like waterlogged Pisces like been on you? Have you been crying a lot? Like it can take so many different forms, right? And Pisces, if we think about its lack of boundaries, its compassion, but sometimes it's like very enabling. This can look like addiction coming in as well and blurring all the lines, blurring all the boundaries. So these obstacles are not very clear, and that's part of the frustration of them. It's a lot of unknowns, it's a lot of waiting, it's a lot of suspension and surrendering, because ultimately Saturn in Pisces, that is its lesson, is that we have to surrender to some deeper sense of faith that is not something concrete that we can build on. It's just what's inside of us. And that may have presented a real problem here, a real obstacle, a real challenge with whatever we're trying to activate and move forward on, whatever we're sharing and communicating our ideas on. That is all going on with this. And I need to mention the Venus too. So the Venus just finished its opposition. It's separating, but it's still very much active. Venus opposing Saturn can really look like that weight I was telling you, but now its damage is even more personal. It's on our self-worth. It's Virgo hypercritical of ourselves, like looking at all of our flaws and going, how could I ever measure up? How could I ever be this beautiful? How could I ever be this successful? How could I ever be this good, this whatever it is, like holding ourselves to kind of an impossible Virgoan standard. Is that a word? Virgo's out there, please correct me. Venus in Virgo can be so hypercritical of itself. It is in the effort to refine, to make mastery, to make beauty of, right? Venus in Virgo is really here to pursue the highest sense of order, which is a beautiful thing. But of course, we know perfection doesn't exist. And so if we try to measure ourselves to that, and we're dealing with this opposing unknown surrender issue, it can be very, very self-critical, and then it takes a hit on our self-worth. Also, I want to mention too, Venus is our finances. So if you're feeling a lot of these unknowns, these challenges in the realms of money too, this is all being at play here. Look at all this energy just in this full moon. So I'm feeling like maybe a lot of this story, this T-square story with the Mars, the Jupiter, the Saturn, the Venus, might be what's kind of triggering this. I'm ready to break out of this. I need a new picture. I need to start over. I need to, or watching somebody else in your community doing that, and you may be standing from the standpoint of, are you crazy? Like, have you not been paying attention to all this other stuff going on here? So be aware. Definitely get some feedback and get some objective, perspective if you can. Take your time with these decisions, but recognize that like this strife, this unknown, this surrender is part of this whole full moon's process. It might have been what's leading to this, but don't let it control it so far as to making a decision that then you're going to have to repair later, right? There's a lot going on. And I definitely think we're seeing this playing out on a world stage, on a political stage right now. And I don't get into details with this stuff, but take that as you will, right? And recognize that as above, so below, as within, so without. So the things that you're seeing playing out in the world, there's some of that inner struggle happening within you. So remember to take it with curiosity. We still have all of this energy in Gemini happening, our Jupiter belief system in Gemini. How can we approach it with openness and curiosity? Why? Why is it that you maybe interpret these things the way you do? Why is that being triggered for you? Open up to, the potential of maybe just unpacking it and pulling apart the strings to see, is there a lesson? Is there a gift in this? Because there may in fact be something there for you to take, a deeper truth there for you to hold on to that can guide you through all of this decision making, through these like rebellious feelings, through this like need to just shake things up a little bit. I should also mention this shakeup, this Uranian, energy can also take the form of something that happens to you, right? So it may be something completely out of your control, and then you're left to wonder, what do I make of this? So try to approach it with that Gemini, with that openness, the objectivity, the curiosity, get the feedback, look at it from, well, what if I turn it this way? And what if I experiment it with this way? And maybe that connects to this thing. And oh, I haven't thought about that in a while. And maybe if I approach it in this different direction, what does that do? And feel free to experiment. Like Aquarius and Gemini are great experimenters of the zodiac. They love to tinker. So how can you maybe bring in some of that energy here and bring some lightness and inquisitiveness to whatever it is you're going through this full moon, whatever is being illuminated for you? I hope this has been helpful. I love doing these for you. My goodness, it's been really fun looking at every chart and just kind of unpacking it bit by bit. So I hope you're enjoying it too. Please be sure to sign up for my Blue Hour newsletter so you get notified once I put these out. And they also have lots of other stuff for you. I do have a discount code in that opening letter of the Blue Hour for my 90-minute readings. If you're interested, I do give readings, a 60-minute reading and a 90-minute reading via Zoom, where you get the recording as well as all the PDFs of the charts. And if you don't have time for that, or if you really would love just a quick forecast or maybe a solar return report, you can also check out my recorded readings that I just released, where I send you either a short 20-minute or a longer 30-40-minute recording of a reading if you would like to check that out. That is on my website, cawnawynmore.com. Of course, be sure to check out Bonfire Babble podcast, where I'm giving the forecast for every zodiac season. They do a lovely job over there, and if you're a witch, they've got marvelous witchy content, and then I'm coming in every month on Cawnawyn's Corner to give the astrology forecast. And be sure to stay tuned for next month. We have a lunar eclipse in Pisces on September 17th. It's going to be a big one, my goodness, especially with the season that we're in this lifetime, my goodness. So on that note, I wish you a life of divine purpose and glory, for you are worthy and you are free. Blessed be.